In the stillness of the western mountains, where only the wind and the mist dare to wander, there stood a humble wooden cottage surrounded by willows and junipers. The place was so remote that only those who had lost their way or those who wished to disappear from the world could ever find it. Inside that small refuge lived Sheikh Hassan, a man in his 50s with a beard as white as mountain snow, and eyes that seemed to read the hidden pages of fate itself. Years ago, he had left behind the noise of towns and markets, choosing solitude over the company of men. No one visited him. His only companions were the moon at night and the song of birds at dawn. One stormy night, just before dawn, Sheikh Hassan awoke with a start. Something unseen had stirred him from sleep. Wrapping his woolen cloak tightly around his shoulders, he stepped outside into the roaring wind. The sky was swallowed by dark clouds and the air carried a strange heaviness, as though the mountain itself was holding its breath. As he reached his doorstep, his eyes caught a sight that froze him in place. There, lying in the threshold, was a baby girl no older than a few months. She was wrapped in a delicate fabric, soft and fine, like something cut from royal garments. Around her tiny neck hung a thin golden necklace engraved with unfamiliar symbols. The sheikh bent down slowly and lifted the child into his trembling arms. A warmth spread through his heart, something he had not felt for many lonely years. It was as if the Almighty had sent this child to awaken his humanity once more. Looking around, he found no footprints, no sound of retreating steps. It was as if the infant had descended straight from the heavens. Bringing her inside, he lit the fire, fed her warm goat's milk, and covered her with a blanket. In her sleeping face, framed by dark curls and long lashes, he saw an innocence that pierced his heart. "Beautiful," he whispered softly, almost to himself. "From now on, your name shall be Güzel, beautiful one." Thus began a story written by destiny itself. What neither he nor the world knew was that this little girl had been born to royalty, a lost princess hidden away by fate. Only God knew what paths awaited her. 7 years passed since the night Sheikh Hassan found her. Güzel grew under his care like a flower nurtured by love. Her beauty blossomed with time, graceful and pure as a spring breeze between the trees. The sheikh taught her to read the Quran from an old mushaf, to recognize the healing herbs of the mountains, and to stay far from the valley roads where caravans passed. To her, the world consisted only of the sky and the small bird that visited her window each morning. But hearts are not meant to stay still forever. Curiosity grows like a hidden fire. One day, while the sheikh was away gathering herbs, Güzel felt an irresistible pull toward the small room she was always forbidden to enter. Her heart pounded as she pushed the door open. Inside, the dim space held shelves lined with old books and, at the center, a wooden chest bound by an iron lock. Searching quietly, she found a small key hidden beneath a cushion the sheikh never let out of sight. When she unlocked the chest, her breath caught. Inside lay a golden necklace, the same one from her earliest faint memories. Next to it was a piece of embroidered cloth bearing a royal insignia, and a torn piece of parchment covered with elegant handwriting that said only, "If anything happens to me, protect her. She is my daughter." Her hands trembled. The room seemed to close in around her. "Who am I? Who left this message?" she thought. Hiding everything back in its place, she sat silently by the window as if nothing had happened. That evening, the sheikh returned. He glanced at her long and deeply as they sat by the fire. His calm demeanor seemed shaken, his hands trembling as he stirred the milk. She saw worry in his eyes buried beneath his thick beard. With a voice both gentle and cautious, she asked, "Uncle, may I ask you something?" He nodded. Ask my heart. Was I born in this cottage, or did you find me somewhere else? A flicker of fear crossed his face. How should I know? You are mine since the moment you took your first breath in these mountains, he replied, his tone uncertain, his voice betraying something he tried to hide. She said nothing more, but her heart knew a veil had lifted slightly from the truth. Later, while he prepared barley bread, she asked again, "And my name, Güzel, did you give it to me, or did I already have it?" The sheikh paused, resting his hands on the table. When I found you, a feeling came over me, he said. Everything about you was beautiful, your face, your calmness, your silence. That is why I named you Güzel. He hesitated, then murmured, Your mother, if only she could have stayed with you. She would have been so happy. The words hung in the air like a secret he could no longer carry. That night, Güzel lay awake, repeating his words again and again. Your mother would have been happy. She whispered to herself, I am not an orphan. I am not from here. Whatever it takes, I will find the truth. As the storm raged outside, thunder shook the walls. The sheikh sat mending his old prayer beads while Güzel arranged dried herbs on the shelves. Suddenly, there were 3 firm knocks on the door. Both froze. Who could it be at this hour? She whispered. The sheikh rose slowly, took his cane, and walked toward the door. Opening it cautiously, he found a man standing there. His face covered, his clothes dusty from travel, only his eyes glinting in the darkness. Peace be upon you, sheikh, the stranger said softly. I have lost my way and my caravan. The night is full of wolves and fear. May I find shelter here? The sheikh hesitated but finally nodded. Come in. We do not turn away travelers. The man entered and sat near the fire, his gaze wandering around the room until it settled on Güzel. He stared at her for a long moment, as if comparing her face to an image in his memory. Finally, he asked, What is your name, my child? She looked at the sheikh, then answered quietly, Güzel. Were you born here? The man continued. Before she could reply, the sheikh intervened quickly. She is my daughter in all but name. I raised her since she was little. She knows no other home. The man nodded, but there was something strange in his tone. A fine upbringing indeed, he said, his eyes unreadable. Güzel sensed he knew something more. As they ate their simple meal of bread and dates, the man asked suddenly, Do you wear any keepsake? A necklace, perhaps? Güzel froze, her hand instinctively touching the hidden locket beneath her clothes. Why do you ask? She said carefully. Just a traveler's curiosity, he replied with a faint smile. That night, as everyone slept, Güzel was stirred by whispers outside. Pressing her ear to the wall, she heard 2 voices, the stranger's and the sheikh's. Are you sure? Asked the sheikh. Yes, the stranger replied. I recognize her face, it has not changed, but she must not know yet. If she learns now, everything will unravel. Güzel's heart raced, her eyes filled with tears as fear and revelation battled within her. She realized her life was built upon a mystery that was finally beginning to unfold. My dear listener, perhaps you too have lived moments when silence hid more than words ever could, when the truth seemed near yet unreachable. In those moments, faith and patience are our lanterns. And if you have come this far with me in this story, may I kindly ask you, please, to support this work by subscribing, leaving a comment, and giving a like. Your presence keeps these stories alive and helps them reach more hearts searching for light. As the fire dimmed and the wind quieted, Güzel sat alone beneath the flickering oil lamp. She was no longer just a child of the mountains, but a young woman standing at the edge of destiny. Her journey toward truth had begun, and neither storm nor silence would stop her now. The dawn came quietly over the mountains, but peace did not return to Sheikh Hassan's small home. The stranger's visit had unsettled everything. Güzel sat near the window, watching the mist fade into sunlight. Her thoughts tangled like threads that could no longer be separated. The sheikh prayed longer than usual that morning, his voice trembling with a weight that words could not bear. When he finally looked at her, his eyes seemed tired, almost defeated. That day passed in uneasy silence. By evening, as the wind settled and shadows deepened, Güzel approached the old man. Her heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "Uncle," she said softly, "I heard you speaking with that man last night." The sheikh froze. His prayer beads slipped from his hand, scattering across the floor. For a moment he said nothing, then exhaled deeply, the sound heavy with years of secrets. "My child," he murmured, "you were never meant to hear those words." "Then it is true," she whispered. "You are hiding something from me." He sat down by the fire, his hands shaking. "For 20 years," he said slowly, "I have carried a secret in my heart. I kept silent because I feared what the truth might bring upon you." His voice faltered and his eyes filled with tears. "The night I found you, the wind howled like a wounded beast. You were wrapped in silk finer than anything these mountains have ever seen. Around your neck was the same golden necklace you wear today. I searched for who might have left you, but no one came, and no one claimed you. I thought perhaps the Almighty had placed you in my path for a reason, to test my mercy or perhaps to bless me in my solitude." Güzel's eyes widened. "Did you ever try to find my family?" "I did," he said, "but the trails led nowhere. No voice answered my calls. So I raised you as my own, not because of duty, but because my heart could not let you go." She looked into his face and saw both truth and pain. For years she had called him father, and in every way that mattered he was one. Yet her heart now throbbed with a new question that neither prayer nor silence could soothe. "Who am I?" The sheikh placed a hand over hers. "The man who came last night spoke of a lost child," he said. "He carried a pendant like yours, one that belonged only to the daughters of kings. He said it reminded him of a royal girl who vanished 20 years ago." The words struck her like lightning. "Then you think I am—" He interrupted quickly, his tone firm but kind. "I do not know. What I know is that the time for silence is over. We must go down from the mountains and seek the truth. There are scholars, elders, and wanderers who remember the old days. Someone will recognize this necklace, or the child who once wore it." That night, as the fire crackled, Güzel packed her few belongings: a small bundle of clothes, her old Quran, and the pendant that had become both her burden and her clue. Before dawn, they began their descent toward the plains. The air grew warmer as they left the peaks behind. She felt both excitement and fear, each step taking her closer to the truth, yet farther from the only home she had ever known. After several days, they reached the city. Its markets hummed with the sound of trade, spices, fabrics, gold, and laughter. For Güzel, it was overwhelming. She had seen only trees and stars all her life. Here, the world was alive in ways she had never imagined. As they walked through the crowded bazaar, a procession suddenly appeared. Soldiers in blue and gold uniforms marching beside a royal carriage trimmed in shining metal. The people bowed as it passed. Güzel froze, her breath catching in her throat. "I do not know why," she murmured, "but something in me recognizes this." Before the sheikh could reply, an old woman approached them, leaning on her cane. Her eyes widened as she studied Güzel's face. By the merciful, she whispered. This face, I have seen it before. The sheikh turned to her. Do you know this girl? The woman trembled. She resembles Princess Huma's lost daughter. They said the child perished in the palace fire 20 years ago, but no one ever found her body. I was a servant in those days. The night of the fire, I saw the nurse running through the courtyard holding a baby wrapped in royal silk. Then she vanished into the smoke. No one knew where she went. Güzel's heart raced. Are you saying that I... The woman nodded slowly. My dear, the resemblance is uncanny. The same eyes, the same mark of grace. If the princess yet lives, you must go to her. The sheikh felt his knees weaken. Is Princess Huma still alive? Yes, said the woman. She dwells with the king, her father, in the upper palace. But since losing her child, she has never smiled again. Güzel's eyes filled with tears. Could it truly be me? Could I be her lost daughter? The sheikh took her hand gently. We do not know yet, he said, but truth has a way of revealing itself when the heart is ready. Let us find those who remember. They searched the old quarters of the city and found a man named Mervan, once a servant of the royal court. When he saw Güzel, he gasped. By Allah, this face! I served Princess Huma when the fire took her child. You bear her likeness exactly. We never found the child's remains. Many of us believed she might have survived. That night, Güzel could not sleep. Her thoughts were filled with fragments of memory. Flashes of fire, a woman's cry, and the echo of a lullaby. Could these be dreams or pieces of a forgotten past? She pressed her hand to the necklace and whispered a prayer. O Allah, if this truth is meant for me, open the path before me. At dawn, they were guided to an old blind woman named Salama, who had once served as the child's wet nurse. Her frail voice shook as she said, The baby I nursed had a black star-shaped birthmark upon her left shoulder. It was a sign known only to her mother and me. Güzel's hands trembled as she uncovered her shoulder. There it was, the same mark, dark as ink, shaped like a tiny star. The old woman gasped and began to weep. It is you, she cried softly. The lost princess has returned. When the sheikh and Güzel reached the palace gates, their hearts pounded like drums. Guards led them through grand halls of marble and gold until they stood before Princess Huma herself. The years had turned her hair silver, but her eyes still shone with noble sadness. The sheikh bowed deeply and spoke with humility. My lady, I bring news that may heal your heart. 20 years ago on a stormy night, I found a baby at my door. Around her neck was this pendant. He held out the necklace. The princess's hands trembled as she reached for it. Tears filled her eyes. My father gave me this very pendant when my daughter was born, she whispered. I fastened it around her neck that same night. Show me the girl. The sheikh turned toward the door. Güzel entered quietly. The princess stared in disbelief, her lips trembling. Those eyes, she said. They are mine. She reached out, touching her daughter's face with trembling fingers. What is your name, my child? Güzel, she whispered. He named me so, the man who found me. At that moment, the hall fell silent. The princess drew her close, tears streaming down her face. The years of grief melted away as mother and daughter were reunited by destiny's grace. When the king learned the truth, he ordered the old records reopened. Witnesses came forth, confirming the nurse's desperate escape. During the fire, the story of the lost princess spread across the kingdom like a dawn breaking after endless night. But in the midst of joy, one heart trembled with humility, Sheikh Hassan's. When the king declared, "This man has preserved our honor and our bloodline," and granted him a home in the royal district, The sheikh bowed his head in gratitude. He had raised a princess without knowing it, and in doing so had become nobler than kings. Güzel wept as she embraced him. "You are my father," she said, "no matter what my blood may be." He smiled through his tears. "And you, my child, are the proof that destiny is written by mercy." Thus ended a journey that began on a stormy mountain night. With a child abandoned, a secret kept, and love that refused to let go. Sometimes what seems like loss is only the beginning of divine design. And sometimes the truth we seek finds us only when our hearts are ready to bear it. The news spread across the land like a breath of spring after a long and merciless winter. In every market and prayer hall, people spoke of the miracle the lost daughter of Princess Huma had returned. The old storytellers who once sang of sorrow now recited verses of reunion, and travelers carried the tale from one city to the next. Yet for Güzel, this was not the end of her journey, but the beginning of understanding who she truly was. The palace, with all its gold and marble, felt unfamiliar to her. She had grown up among trees and prayer, wind and silence. Here everything gleamed and echoed. Servants bowed as she passed, and noblewomen whispered behind their fans. Her garments were woven of silk, her meals served on silver. But her heart longed for the mountain's quiet dawns. Many nights she stood by her balcony, gazing at the stars that had once shone through the cracks of Sheikh Hassan's cottage roof. One evening, Princess Huma joined her. The air smelled of jasmine and evening rain. "My daughter," she said softly, "for years I prayed that Allah would bring you back to me. Every night I dreamed of your face, not knowing you were safe in the care of a righteous man." Her voice broke with emotion. "Tell me about him." Güzel smiled faintly. "He is more than a father. He taught me to read the Quran before I could even count the days. He showed me that faith is not in words but in deeds. He never raised his voice, never spoke of himself. When I looked into his eyes, I saw peace." The princess's eyes glistened. "Then Allah chose well," she whispered. "He sent you to a man of heart when the world burned around you." The next morning, a grand ceremony filled the palace square. The king stood upon his throne, his voice echoing through the courtyard. "By divine will," he proclaimed, "the lost princess has been found, and by the same will Sheikh Hassan shall be honored as a guardian of truth." Crowds shouted blessings. The sheikh, humbled and trembling, bowed his head as gold and silk were placed before him. Yet his heart remained far from glory. That night, when all the lights were dimmed, he prayed in solitude. "O Lord, I am but your servant. Do not let pride dwell where gratitude should live." Days turned to weeks. Güzel learned courtly customs, royal speech, and the duties of her rank, but within her heart she still heard the whisper of the mountain winds. Sometimes she would walk through the gardens barefoot, feeling the earth beneath her toes as she had in childhood. Servants watched in confusion, but she smiled and said, "The ground reminds me of where I came from." One afternoon, while studying old records in the royal library, she found something that made her breath catch. It was a letter sealed with wax, its handwriting graceful yet hauntingly familiar. She opened it carefully. "If fate separates us, remember that love is stronger than fire. Those who walk with truth are never lost." The letter was signed with her mother's name. Tears filled her eyes. She understood now that her life had been shaped not by accident, but by divine mercy guiding every step, even through flames and fear. Meanwhile, Sheikh Hassan had chosen to live modestly despite the king's generosity. The palace offered him servants and comfort, but he preferred the simplicity of a small garden house near the city's edge. There he spent his days teaching children the verses of the Quran and the stories of the prophets. His fame spread quietly, not through wealth, but through wisdom. People came seeking advice, and he greeted them all with the same warmth he once gave to a lonely baby at his door. One night, Güzel visited him. The old man sat beneath an olive tree, the Quran open on his lap. The moonlight touched his face like a blessing. "Father," she said gently, "I do not belong fully to this palace. My blood may be royal, but my soul belongs to your cottage and to the one who placed me there." He looked at her with eyes that had seen both loss and miracle. "My child," he said, "a person's worth is not written in their lineage but in their heart. Royalty fades, but righteousness endures." She knelt beside him, taking his hand. "Will you return to the mountains?" He smiled faintly. "No, my body is too old for climbing, but my heart still lives there. When I close my eyes, I hear the same wind that brought you to my door, and I thank Allah every time it passes." Silence surrounded them, deep and gentle. Then Güzel said, "I want to rebuild the cottage so others lost and abandoned might find shelter as I did." The Sheikh's eyes softened. "Then you will have fulfilled what was written for you. Every blessing is complete only when shared." Under her guidance, the old cottage was rebuilt, not as a palace, but as a refuge. Travelers, widows, and orphans found food and warmth there. People began calling it the House of Mercy. Güzel would visit often, sitting by the fire and telling stories of hope. She spoke of the night she was found, of the mystery that became a miracle, and of how Allah writes light into the darkest chapters. Years passed. The kingdom prospered under the king's wisdom and the princess's compassion. Sheikh Hassan, now frail but content, spent his final days surrounded by peace. When his time came, he left this world as he had lived in it, quietly with prayer on his lips. The people mourned him deeply, and the king himself led the prayer for his burial. That night, Güzel sat beneath the stars, remembering his words. "Royalty fades, righteousness endures." She lifted her hands in supplication. "O Lord," she whispered, "you took me from the fire and placed me in the arms of mercy. Let me now be mercy for others." As the wind moved through the olive trees, it felt as though the mountains themselves were answering. Somewhere in the unseen, the story had come full circle. The child who once lay at a stranger's door had become a daughter of light, a symbol of faith's quiet triumph. And so, dear listener, remember this: fate may hide its purpose behind pain, but it never acts without wisdom. The storms that scatter us often carry us to the very place we are meant to be. The Sheikh did not find a child by chance. He found a test that became his greatest blessing. And the girl who sought her origin found something greater. She discovered that truth, once veiled, always reveals itself to the heart that keeps faith. So when your path darkens, when loss blinds your sight, recall the story of Güzel. Her beginning was wrapped in mystery, but her ending was written in light. Between those two moments stretched the mercy of God, patient, perfect, and everlasting. May your heart find peace in that same mercy, and may you too recognize the hidden blessings left quietly at your door. Years passed gently, as if time itself had softened in the glow of mercy. The kingdom entered a season of peace and prosperity unlike any in living memory. Merchants spoke of justice in the markets. Travelers found safety on the roads, and mothers whispered prayers of gratitude for a land guided by compassion rather than pride. Within the palace walls, Princess Güzel, once the child of mystery, became known throughout the empire for her wisdom and humility. People said her voice carried the calm of prayer, and that her eyes, though noble, still reflected the simplicity of the mountains that raised her. Every week she visited the House of Mercy, the humble refuge built on the ruins of Sheikh Hassan's old cottage. There she would sit among the poor and the broken, listening to their stories, washing the hands of the sick, and comforting the orphans who trembled at night. She never wore jewels in that place. Instead, she dressed in plain garments and covered her head with a simple white scarf. To her, every act of kindness was a way to honor the man who had taught her the meaning of faith. On one of those mornings, while tending to a child with a fever, a traveler arrived at the door. His clothes were dusty and his eyes were tired, but he bowed deeply before her. "Your Highness," he said, "I come from the southern deserts. There are villages there with no water, no bread. They have heard of your mercy and hope that you might send help." Güzel looked at him with quiet resolve. "If Allah has allowed me to live in comfort," she said, "then it is only so that I may serve those who do not." The next day she sent caravans of food, healers, and scholars to the farthest corners of the realm. When her mother, Princess Huma, saw the reports, she wept with joy. "You were lost to me once," she said to her daughter, "but Allah returned you not only as my child but as a light for many others." As for Sheikh Hassan, his resting place became a site of gentle pilgrimage. People came not to worship but to remember the shepherd of mercy who once took in a nameless child and gave her a future. On quiet evenings, Güzel would sit beside his grave, reading from the Quran and whispering verses about gratitude and destiny. "You taught me everything," she would say softly. "Even in your silence, you spoke more wisdom than any scholar." One evening, as the sky darkened with an approaching storm, Güzel remained at the House of Mercy longer than usual. A little girl clung to her robe, refusing to sleep. "Tell me a story," the child begged. Güzel smiled. "Then I shall tell you the story of how truth hides behind patience." Her voice rose gently above the sound of rain. Once, a baby was left at a stranger's door in the middle of a storm. The man who found her had nothing, no gold, no family, but he had faith. He cared for her, taught her to pray, and loved her as his own. Years passed, and that child grew up, searching for who she was. She found her answer not in blood or wealth, but in mercy. The child blinked sleepily. "What happened to the man?" "He returned to his Lord," Güzel replied. "But his love lives on in every good deed done in his memory." "And the girl?" "She learned that sometimes Allah hides his gifts in disguise so that when we find them, we know their worth." The child smiled and drifted to sleep. Güzel watched her for a while, then turned her gaze toward the flickering lamp. Her heart filled with peace. She knew that her own life, once a riddle, had become an answer for others. Years later, when age began to soften her face, Güzel continued to lead with gentleness. She established schools for girls, teaching them reading, faith, and kindness. "Knowledge," she said, "is the lantern of the soul, and faith is its oil. Without one, the other fades." Her words spread across the realm, inspiring generations of women who learned not only to read the words of God, but to live by them. One spring morning, a messenger brought news from distant lands. Tribes once divided by greed were now trading peacefully under her protection. The House of Mercy had grown into an entire network of shelters, feeding the hungry from the borders to the mountains. People began to say that the lost princess had become the mother of the nation, but Güzel never claimed such titles. "There is no greatness in me," she told her attendants. "There is only the echo of one man's kindness." Her mother, Princess Huma, often visited her in those years. Together they prayed side by side in the palace garden, thanking Allah for turning loss into reunion. "If you could see how I once despaired," her mother confessed one evening, "you would know how vast His mercy truly is." Güzel took her mother's hands. "The fire that once took your child," she said softly, "was the same flame that guided me home. Nothing is wasted in His plan." When Gazelle reached her later years, she asked to be buried beside Sheikh Hassan in the mountain valley, where she had first opened her eyes to the world. The royal court protested, offering marble tombs and gilded domes, but she refused them all. "I was found among the poor," she said, "and I shall rest among them." The morning of her passing was clear and calm. Birds gathered on the roof of the House of Mercy as if to honor her final dawn. She lay peacefully, her golden necklace placed upon her chest, its engravings still shining after all those years. Her final words, spoken barely above a whisper, were a prayer of gratitude. "O Lord, you brought me from darkness into your light. Let me now return to you in peace." When news of her death reached the city, the people wept openly. Thousands walked behind her coffin as it was carried up the mountain path. Among them were orphans, travelers, scholars, and nobles, each touched in some way by her kindness. The muezzins of every mosque raised their voices in unison, reciting verses of mercy that echoed across the valleys. And there, beneath the willow trees that once guarded Sheikh Hassan's cottage, they laid her to rest beside the man who had changed her destiny. The wind whispered through the branches like a prayer, and the sky glowed with the quiet dignity of farewell. It is said that even today, travelers passing through those mountains sometimes hear a faint sound carried by the breeze, the soft laughter of a girl and the deep, gentle voice of an old man. Whether it is memory or miracle, only Allah knows. But the hearts that hear it feel lighter, as if reminded that every soul, no matter how lost, can find its way home. So remember, dear listener, whenever life's storms leave you stranded or alone, think of the night when mercy knocked at a stranger's door. For every trial you endure, every loss you bear, may in truth be the beginning of a blessing written only for you. And thus ends the tale of Guzelle, the lost princess found not by power but by compassion. Her story teaches us that love guided by faith becomes eternal, and that the quiet acts of the humble often echo longer than the crowns of kings. In the silence that followed Guzelle's burial, the mountains seemed to breathe with peace. The wind that once carried the cry of a lost baby now whispered prayers of gratitude through the trees. The House of Mercy remained open, its lamps glowing each night, tended by those who had learned from her kindness. Generations would pass, and her name would become a story told at the end of every sermon. A reminder that the smallest act of compassion can change the course of destiny. Years after her passing, a traveler from a distant land arrived in that valley. He was a scholar, weary from study and solitude, seeking a place to rest. As he entered the small shrine beside her grave, he saw a group of children sitting on the ground, reciting verses of the Quran. An elderly caretaker, his beard white as the mountain snow, smiled and said, "These children are her legacy. She taught us that every soul, no matter how poor or forgotten, carries within it a spark of light. We must keep it alive." The scholar knelt beside the tombstone, tracing his fingers over the inscription carved in marble. "Here rests Guzelle, the child of mercy, daughter of destiny, beloved of Allah." He felt a calm he had not known for years. Stepping outside, he looked toward the horizon where the sun met the peaks and whispered, "If faith can raise the lost to royalty, then truly no heart is beyond hope." From that day forward, he stayed among them, teaching the orphans to read, planting olive trees, and continuing the mission that Guzelle had begun. Slowly, the valley became a haven for travelers, widows, and seekers of knowledge. People said the air itself carried blessings, for no one entered that place without feeling a strange warmth settle upon the heart. The mountains that had once hidden pain now sheltered peace. The story of Guzelle's life became part of the region's heritage. Poets recited her tale in markets, halls. Scholars wrote it into manuscripts and parents whispered it to their children before sleep. Yet what touched people most was not her royal birth or her reunion with her mother, but her humility. They said she proved that greatness is not inherited. It is lived, one merciful act at a time. Among the people of the valley, one saying endured for centuries: where a tear falls for another, there walks the spirit of Güzel. Mothers would repeat it to their daughters, and travelers etched it on their walking sticks. It was as if her memory had woven itself into the fabric of faith, turning her story into a living prayer. In time, the old House of Mercy became a school. Its walls, once made of simple stone and wood, were rebuilt by those who loved her. Children from faraway villages came to study there. Orphans, wanderers, even the children of kings. The teachings of Sheikh Hassan and Güzel were passed down together, forming what many began to call the path of compassion. It was neither a sect nor a new order, but a way of living. To walk humbly, to serve sincerely, and to see every stranger as a trust from God. The school's most cherished lesson was simple. True nobility lies not in being served, but in serving others. Those words were written above the doorway, illuminated each morning by the rising sun. Every student who entered would touch the inscription with their hand and whisper, "O Lord, make me a servant of mercy." Many generations later, when the kingdom itself had changed and new rulers sat upon the throne, pilgrims still came to the valley. Some brought offerings of flowers, others only tears. A few came seeking miracles, and though none claimed to see visions, all left with lighter hearts. One night during Ramadan, a young girl stood at Güzel's grave and prayed for her sick mother. When she returned home, she found her mother sitting up, smiling for the first time in months. The girl told no one of miracles. She simply returned to the valley each year, leaving a single white rose on the grave. Stories like this grew around her resting place, but the true miracle remained the same. That a child once abandoned had become a symbol of divine care. It reminded believers that Allah never forsakes the faithful, even when all seems lost. The mountain, once a place of solitude, had become a testament to His mercy, a living verse carved into the earth itself. One evening, centuries after her death, a wandering imam visited the valley. He stood before the children studying by lantern light and said, "Do you know why her story endures?" The children shook their heads. The imam smiled. Because it was not her beauty that made her remembered, nor her royal blood, nor the crown upon her head. It was the mercy she carried within her heart, the mercy that mirrors the compassion of our Creator. Whoever lives with that light becomes eternal. That night, as the children repeated their lessons, the imam walked outside and looked toward the mountains. The stars shimmered like tiny lamps hung by angels. He whispered verses of gratitude, remembering that every life guided by faith is a continuation of a divine story. An unseen thread connecting past to present, sorrow to joy. He sat beneath a willow tree, writing by the light of a small oil lamp. His quill moved slowly as he recorded her tale for the next generation. Let those who read remember. She was found by a man who asked for nothing and gave everything. He did not know she was a princess, nor did she need to be one to deserve love. He saw only a child in need, and that was enough. When he finished, he closed his book and prayed, "O Lord, let me love as they loved, without measure, without condition, without end." The wind rose softly around him, stirring the pages before falling still again. It was as if the valley itself had answered Amin. And so, dear listener, as you reach the end of this story, carry its truth with you. No act of kindness is ever wasted, and no soul is ever forgotten. The world may change, kingdoms may crumble, but the echo of mercy never